how to prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you. And I think this has been a journey that's evolved for you. You were, for years, and maybe you still are, a marathon runner, very good marathon runner, very competitive. And I always kind of saw that as your outlet for your life and what your life was at the time, when you were at that time married with stepkids and doing lots of different things. But talk to me about that and what you've learned about that, because I have to believe that's changed and evolved for you.
It definitely has. Yes. So prioritizing self-care. Yeah. Running was an outlet. I ran hard. So that's kind of an analogy almost, though, if I'm going to be completely honest, of sort of what I was doing internally too, of just running and sort of just not prioritizing self-care. I think a lot of times we just missed the mark. I missed the mark on self-care. And unfortunately, as I've evolved and changed and grown in my journey, I've had to really come to terms with my relationship with running. I am still very passionate about it.
Sure.
However, I've understood now that self-care means rest.
Yes. Which is so hard when we're used to running all the time.
It's so hard. And all the stuff, when I'm working with people too, and thinking for myself too, just if you in this moment just take a deep breath and think about rest and what comes up for you when you think about rest, there's so much. Yeah.
And I think
shame and
that's just it. And that's what I was getting to get at. I'm so glad you brought that up. It forces you to sit with really uncomfortable feelings that if you keep running, whether it's a marathon or just your errands throughout the day or whatever it is you're running around doing, when you've got to sit in your stuff and listen and make yourself stay there, that can be very disruptive, but also absolutely necessary. And I totally resonate with that journey because that's where I got to as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. Confidently setting boundaries. Tell me about your journey with that.
Yeah, I love how they kind of both go hand in hand, because
for sure,
when I think of rest and then when you ask about boundaries, I think a lot about fear. So I always would like to think about what are the purpose of the boundaries? What am I keeping myself safe from?
Sure.
And honestly, I've completely changed my relationship to boundaries. Whereas before, they might have been necessary to keep me safe from something.
Sure.
But now I also see them as a growing point. So a lot of times when I feel myself coming up against something, which can be externally felt as tension, resistance, restlessness, frustration, irritation.
Yeah.
It's an alarm for me. Oh, I'm coming up against some boundaries. So hallelujah. Because it means there's time for growth. So sort of shifting my paradigm on boundaries to be how can I use this as a way to grow and expand in my life?
That's really good. I love that. And I think absolutely. Now tell me, have you always felt that way with boundaries, or is this something that you've had to learn in your journey?
Yeah. So I would say that it's definitely something that's evolved as I have. And that the first step, with boundaries and with fear and self-care and realizing all these things is really acceptance. You have to see it. You have to acknowledge it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
and own it and not run away from it.
Which is it's uncomfortable, right? And so it's not even about changing anything. It's about being there's something coming up for me and I don't know what to do about it. It's maybe I'm talking all over the place, but it's also about giving yourself permission not to know the answer, not to know what's going to happen. Yeah. And then just being okay with that not being okay.
Yeah.
And I could go on and on about this.
I think there's a lot to say about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And you're going to hear that theme a lot this season. I had this conversation with another guest last week that's going to be on season 4. And it's just very, very important. If you're really going to get where you want to be, that you just get like, all right, this is okay. I don't have to know it all right now. That's okay, because I can learn and I can find out and I can evolve.
Yeah. And I think like something for me, especially like in my life, like I've gone through so many different careers and paths and things like this and degrees. And I'm like, oh, if I just get this, then I'll have what I need.
Yeah.
And really just coming back into this present moment and being like, wait, what's going on right here and right now?
Yeah.
You know, why am I always looking ahead? What's here? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that requires you to feel what's coming up in this moment.
Yeah.
And if I can share,
absolutely.
I had this wonderful opportunity with this client last night, and just in alignment with what you're talking about in the Feel podcast and stuff. And she just has lived her whole life like with so much emotion, right? And panic attacks and fear. And like, she's coming to therapy, like, there's something wrong with me. I need you to fix it. Right?
Yeah. Which is so normal for people to do that.
Absolutely. But I had to tell her, like, no, this is not a problem. There's nothing wrong with you because of this.
Yeah.
And she told me, she's like, I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm hearing this, that I'm not a problem that needs to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with me. Those emotions, those feelings are there for a reason. And when we can listen to them, they just propel us deeper and more expansively in our life.
Yeah.
More
I think
freer.
we are afraid of some feelings, and culture has told us that some things are negative and some things are positive.
Totally.
When in fact, they are all there to give us clues to what needs to be dealt with. And if we can take the stereotype of negative, I just say all emotions are good.
Yeah.
We were gifted with them to help us navigate and identify when something is awry or isn't right. And I think we have to be okay and learn. I've had to learn how to trust those. I think we also don't trust those. We don't trust our feelings. We've been told as women, especially, we're too emotional and we can't trust our feelings. And it's like, oh, absolutely not. They're there to help us if we just put them in the right context.
Absolutely. Trust is a huge one.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's something that was a really big thing that I noticed looking into the story of my life.
Yeah.
You know, experiencing betrayal in relationship or betrayal in, you know, friendship or partnership, whatever it is.
Sure.
But really what I realized was that the only person that was betraying me was myself.
And that's tough to own sometimes when you realize I have a responsibility in this too. And I think that's where you're able to actually really make progress. You take yourself out of victim mode, not taking away from the traumas and things that happen to you, but put yourself into, I have the power mode. I can make different choices here. But when you don't trust yourself, it's hard to do that. You can't do that. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health, which we've really kind of already talked about. But what are some practices you use to process your emotions in a healthy way so they don't get stored up in here?
Yeah, because in my job and everybody's job in the day-to-day, you're constantly taking stuff on. Yeah. And a lot of people tend to blame themselves for that. So anyways, that aside, what I do is every day I make it a practice to, I wake up in the mornings and I do set my intention for the day. And I really ground myself into the moment and just so you could call that a prayer, just a ritual, whatever word you want to put for it. And then I just give myself that time to just come into myself and really align with my North Star of life. And then depending on what's called for in that day, like what I'm feeling or what like energy is in my field, I'll do some yoga, go for a run. And I love it.
Yeah.
I also feel, I was kind of thinking about this too. And this concept of journaling is so cliche.
Yes.
But I have to say, one thing that I think is really important to kind of reframe what a journal means is that it's sort of a safe space to begin to create a place that is safe externally where you can learn to build trust in yourself. And so many times with mental health and with emotional health, there's nothing really like externally, right? That we can, oh yeah, here, do this, and then you're fixed, right?
Right.
It's not that way. So a journal can serve as just sort of like a very external resource of an intentional space to give yourself that room to kind of build trust in yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to put it. I mean, and I think you have to decide how journaling works best for you. For me, I write down what I'm feeling every day. How am I feeling this morning and why? So that I can get in touch with that. And then it's just kind of a of like, these are the things on my mind today. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm needing. This is what I'm hoping for. This is what I'm thankful for. And what I've found for me is I used to have a really like flinchy response to gratitude journals and to being told to be thankful all the time because I lived in an environment growing up, and I have an episode about this last season. I coined it weaponized gratitude, where people were kind of using gratitude as a weapon with me within my spaces. And I think women run into it a lot in the workspace. And so this helped me really realize that I'm not any less grateful or thankful for what is happening in my life that's good just because I'm having all these other feelings and emotions too. But I say all that to say, find how that works for you. It's going to look different for everybody. For some people, that's how they pray. If they pray. For some people, it's just where they kind of and get all the anxious thoughts out so their minds can rest. But find that way that it works for you. Some people do verbal, like they will record. And I'll have days that I do that. I need to talk it out. I'm an external processor, and writing it down isn't enough. So I'll take it a next step, and I'll record myself just kind of saying it all. So
I love that. I think it's a really important point too, that the importance that everybody's journey is different.
Yeah.
I think I personally spent a lot of time comparing myself to others. And then I started to realize the importance of how, when somebody truly steps into their truth and who they are, how much space it gives for everyone else.
Absolutely.
And so just like an encouraging word of like, really step into what works for you, because that's what's meant to be in this world, to be with you, and will open up so much space for you and all those around you. And being patient as you're finding that, and not being afraid to like, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something new. And also recognizing that's going to change in different seasons of your life. Totally. Oh my gosh. Yes. Stagnation.
Yes. What works for you now is probably not going to work for you 5 years from now. Absolutely. And you'll feel that. You'll know. And it's just we get so into habits. We're like, well, this has always worked for me. I just got to stick to it. I'm just in a flat spot. Maybe you are, but maybe it's time to change things up and look at who you are today versus when you started that practice, you know, at that time too. So flexibility within that, and within, even the boundaries that you set, those are going to change over time. So being flexible with those and being aware of that. And you're all these practices, all these things, just hold them loosely, have them, identify them. But when they stop feeling helpful, or even if you may have different days, you need different things. There are days I need to go on a vigorous walk where I'm really like working it out. There are other days where I just need to yoga and stretch and relax and calm, and some days both. So listening to your body each day and being open to that. I think because each day brings different things. Yes.
And life shoots us out of our bodies all the time.
Yeah.
Especially as women. I mean, just there's a lot of shame and guilt and fear inside of our bodies.
Yeah.
And the more that we can listen to our bodies, the better.
You kind of spoke to this earlier, the giving permission piece. How can we support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically?
Again, I think it's like we all have this idea that we have to be selfless, right? And especially as women, I hear a lot, oh my God, I have to be a caretaker, I have to be a giver, I'm this, I'm that for everybody, I'm a fixer. Oh, okay, let's let all that go, please, and come back into yourself. And when you can start listening to yourself and making yourself a priority and really stepping into the understanding that when you do, you are then allowing that space for others to do the same.
Absolutely.
And it starts here.
Yeah. And it gives permission when people see other women see, people doing that. It gives permission to have that same experience. And I think this ties nicely into your journey. I mean, you identify yourself at your pronouns are she, her, you're open-hearted person, journeying after truth.
Yeah.
When I met you, you were married. Like I mentioned earlier, you were married to a man who was worked in Coeur d'Alene at a business where he had a lot of contact with a lot of people from all over the world that came in.
Yeah.
And there, you had a very public issue with him when he was caught embezzling from this company. Yeah. And it's in a community where your life became a fishbowl. And he went on to go to prison. You stayed with him for quite a while through all of that.
Yeah.
And so I've thought about you a lot when we've talked about abdicating yourself and living unapologetically and not feeling like you have to take care of everything and everybody, because you are a very kind, giving person by your nature. When Danielle is like, she's very warm, very soft-hearted, like she just has that way about her. I feel like that situation can really like expose those things almost to a detriment. So talk to me a little bit about that, because that was wild to watch. I mean, it was really wild to watch, and I felt so horrible for you. And we were like second tier friends. So we were really close friends with people who were really close with your husband. Yeah. And at the time. And I remember, it created some interesting dynamics, because I'm like, I'm more worried about Danielle than I am him, which was kind of a weird scenario to be in, because these friends who were close with him had known him for years, since he was a small child, and asked Brady to do something on behalf of your husband at the time. And Brady's like, I can't do that. I don't have the history with him that you do, and I can't do that in good conscience. And I love you, but my allegiance is to you. And we're really concerned about Danielle and all of this. So, anyway,
oh my gosh,
I've said a lot. I kind of opened a can of worms, but I feel like for people to really understand your journey, and and Danielle gave me permission to say, before we got on, we talked about this. So talk to me about that and how these things we've talked about so far have come into play. And I think too, as we move forward in other, like talking about your values, at your expectations of yourself versus others, this is all going to play into it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to take a deep breath, because I really want to do the best that I can with sharing this part.
Yeah.
For the best of your viewers or listeners. It was a wild ride. Okay. So again, I'm going to say that the most important thing that I really learned from the whole situation is listening to self, listening to that inner still voice.
Yeah.
While I was married, I had no reason in my conscious mind to not trust my husband at the time.
Sure.
Except I do want to share this story, because I will never forget this moment. I was driving and there was something inside of me, and it was like this itch inside my body. And I was like, something's not right. And I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I feel like I can't trust him. Like, what the hell is going on right now? I don't know.
Yeah.
It came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So anyway,
no palatable evidence to present you.
Exactly. There was nothing there that I knew of physically. So anyways, I my mom really encouraged me, like, listen to yourself, listen to that feeling. So I did to the best of my ability. We were in the kitchen and I was like, hey, I know this is coming out of right field, but like, what, is there something you're not telling me?
Yeah.
He's like, no, there's nothing going on. I was like, okay, a little bit of shame,
Sure.
And there's this Bible verse, and it's like, whatever happens behind closed doors will come out. And so I was like, in one last ditch effort, I'm like walking away from the kitchen and I'm like, okay, well, remember this verse, haha, right? Like whatever happens, like just wanted to let you know. And then a couple weeks later, the story's sort of out there. A police officer came to our door, and next thing I know, he's going to prison for 2 years. Yes, it was one of the most difficult times of my life. However, I didn't ever stop. I just kept going. It was like I was in this mode of go, 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 survive, 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 survive.
Sure.
He left, and it was like, okay, I got to talk to his stepkids. I got to talk to the stepmom. I've got to figure out this. I've got to go to work. I've got to go to school. I was just about to start my grad program, and I was working full time. And it was just like, I had to sell the house. The house sold the day that he went away, and it was just like chaos ensued, right?
Yeah.
But I had this idea that I had to just do it, and I had to just go through it, right?
Right.
And it was miserable.
Yeah.
I don't know how much more detail you want me to get into it, but like, I'd wake up at 5 a.m. Yeah. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., go visit him 3 hours away in this like freezing cold prison where I'd be like just freezing because you can't wear a jacket. Then I'd go back.
And Danielle is a tiny little thing. She doesn't have insulation.
Oh my God, it was crazy. Oh my God, it was crazy. There was, and then he went down to Boise, and I would fly down there when I could. And it was just like this psychotic thing, right?
Right.
So now fast forward to like now, right? I divorced him, and then I got back together with him, and then I left him, and then we got back together, and it was just this crazy chaotic thing, right? Of just like guilt and what do I do? And oh my God, what is this? What does this do? What is going on? I would say that
codependency too. I would think some codependency was tied into that.
And also this idea that I need to be something for somebody else. I need to fulfill their purpose, or I need to do this to be okay. I'm supposed to do this, or, this idea that I'm not complete without this other. So codependency, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's been a couple years now, and I would say that I'm like really just now really feeling free from it.
Wow.
And really seeing how closed down I was, how much stress I was under, and how my body was really telling me, but I wasn't listening.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of us, women, people, whatever, go through these experiences in our life and then expect ourselves to just get over it. My body, not just from that experience, but like from childhood, like there's a lot of stuff there, right?
Yeah.
And our bodies take all that on. Like I had ulcers, I broke my hips. I got my appendix out. I went through a lot of health shit that I just, and so anyway, it's been quite the process of really just also letting him out of my life and letting him go.
Yes.
And letting that part of myself die. Because that Danielle that was then is no longer.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the betterment of you. But, that was a season. And I think I'm glad you shared those different physical things, because that's all tied into your emotional health and what wasn't getting dealt with or expended with. And it will store up, and it will show up, guys. It will show up in some way.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
And you had that experience.
Yeah. And I just like kept taking this shit on. And it's like, I mean, there was lots of stuff going on with my family too at that same time. And it was just like, you get this, you get really this like idea that like I'm too much. This is too much. I have to do it myself.
Yeah, I think that's
we gotta let that one go.
Oh my gosh, yes. And especially when you come from family systems or in relationships where that's the message that's sent. Like, even if they don't verbally say it, the messages they're sending you with their responses or lack of response or are telling you that. I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about, and we have to release that narrative. Yeah.
We really do. Because again, when you can let that down, that I'm too much feels that like victim martyrdom kind of thing, which I definitely have had.
Sure.
And it's like, honestly, you do need to take a moment and really feel sorry for yourself and just let yourself feel it.
Yeah.
And then give yourself that permission to open up to support. Because I didn't realize how shut down I was to opening up to support.
Sure.
I just didn't know. And I was just in survival, right? My nervous system, because you're right, it was such a small town. Like, I was paralyzed.
Gosh.
I was paralyzed.
Yeah. And understand, Danielle, people knew who Danielle was. They knew who she was married to. Because she, like, through the marathons and stuff, she was in the paper too. I mean, they were, in this space, very public. It was on the news. It was in the newspapers. It was awful for her.
And, I'm just done with the show.
Yeah.
It was such a show. And sometimes I just look back and I just was filling a role. And I was a shell of who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm done with that costume of filling a role for others or doing what you think others do, because it's not true and it's not the truth.
Yeah.
And that whole, like, he was very, very, what's that word? Like, just
gregarious and outgoing and friendly. He's a guy you met, you liked him immediately. He was lovely. very inviting.
He's and which is wonderful. And, I have to say, like, about a year ago, I was able to come to a place where I was so grateful for the journey. And I called him up and I said, I just want to say thank you.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sorry. Because I don't believe that you can have one thing without the other. Like, there's this, this equates to this, right? And so there, with him, and then there was me, right? So there was a part of me that I wasn't listening to that I was betraying the whole time, right? And I wasn't conscious of, so it's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. However, that was because of him, me. And so I'm taking that responsibility of being like, I was playing the shutting down type so that could exist, or however you want to say it.
Absolutely.
And to come to a point where I could be like, I am so glad for where I am in this moment right here speaking with you. And if I had to go through it all over again, then okay.
Yeah.
Like, so grateful.
Yeah.
It taught me so much. And I think that I'm just so grateful,
Well, and just being able to hold that nuance and that juxtaposition of that, of both of those feelings, and be able to say both of those things. I think that's one that we're so dualistic in our thinking sometimes that we don't allow space for that. And also having to give yourself the grace and the empathy and the forgiveness and the room I think there's a lot to that too, so that you could process and move through all of these things, identify what new boundaries need to be, put in practices that were healthy for you. And not for the other. Yes, you did. You relocated to a beautiful location. She went from one beautiful location to another beautiful, but very different location.
So different. And the process here has been like so healing and just so much. And, I'm in another time of change in my life again. And I'm just so grateful for the freedom to just like, kind of like what you said, just grow and change and evolve as life wants to for me.
Right. Right. Yeah. And giving yourself permission for that. So one last thing before we move into some other things that are going to tie in perfectly to this, but I wanted the audience to hear, because I think there's many women out there that feel like they can't leave, they can't change, or they're going to disappoint all these people. I'm like, well, what if you are disappointing yourself, you got to get to a point where you're willing, like, I will disappoint others before I disappoint myself. But that is not an natural inclination for women. So what was that kind of final straw, if there was one, that was like, nope, no more. This is it. I have to do this. Is hard. It hurts. It's going to be a journey. It's going to suck, but I've got to do this. Was there a breaking point, or was it just an exhaustion of like, I can't do this anymore?
I think to start, you get to a point where you don't have a choice anymore if you let it. And I actually divorced Tony, then got remarried to him, and then got it annulled. And at that time, it felt like life just was like this. You're done.
Yeah.
And so I would say that no matter in those choices, you got to come to terms with the fact that no matter what you decide, it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
If you decide to disappoint someone else or yourself, it's, if you decide to leave or stay in whatever situation that you're in, don't kid yourself that there's an easy out. There's no easy out.
Yeah.
And life is full of suffering. And the more that you allow yourself to just acknowledge that, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're going to get through it. Be present to that part, because you're probably already hurting. So let yourself.
Yeah.
And now I'm at a point where I can make that choice, and I can see where that tension is and then make a choice. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that you spoke to be present, because I think when we are leaving something hard, we just want to get to the other side of it. And if we don't stay present and process all that stuff, we can't heal.
And we'll repeat that pattern.
Absolutely.
And also, one thing that I've really realized is that sometimes we think that when we're giving something up, that it's just going to be gone and we'll never get it. But I can't tell you how many times I've surrendered an idea, a concept, a thing in my life, and it's come back better.
Wow. Oh, wow. Wow. So important. And I think, and being willing, because there's fear going into it that won't be the experience. So, that willingness to surrender and believe that it's possible.
And let fear be your personal trainer. So instead of making it your enemy, it's there because it's trying to teach you something. So just listen a little more, and just like I said, again, we're just going to say, be present with that fear.
Yeah. And what's it trying to tell me?
Yeah, because also if you're seeing it, it's because you're ready to let go of whatever that fear is protecting you from.
Yeah.
And you don't need that protection in the same way you needed it.
Yeah.
And when I left that past relationship, that fear that was coming up, I was ready to graduate from it.
Wow.
I was ready to step into the truth of what really wanted to be in my life.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So in that, talk to me about the importance of setting and coming back to your why and / your values and everything you do. Because I feel like discovering that or figuring that out had to play a role here. And just in your life period.
Yes. Freedom was a big one for me. I remember in grad school, one of my professors was like, Danielle, I picture you, and you're like a running shoe with balls of chains attached to it.
Oh, wow. What an analogy.
Right? Yeah. Oof. And I was still married I was still going through that sort of chaotic part. And so at that time, freedom was my North Star. So I like using the term North Star because it's like that guiding principle, right? So even in the dark clouds, it's like you're setting that intention very internally, very subconsciously. And then you're manifesting your life from it. And so at that time, freedom was it, and truth has always been just this internal compass for me.
Yeah.
And such a desire for me to seek truth in all things that I do. So
yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. It does. And I think that's how you ended up getting there, because you stuck to that. Even in the times where you ignored it, you kept coming back to it.
Life has a way of doing that.
It does. It does. It forces our hand sometimes, which we need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
Talk to me about living out of your own expectations versus others, because there was a whole heap full of expectations coming at. Whenever you have family dynamics that are complicated, there's expectations that go with that. Then you talk about all the things going on in your relationship, even if there wasn't, unhealthy parts of it. That's just part of life. But then it got heaped on with all these complications. And then you leaving the space, moving to a different part of the West Coast completely, far away. So, and where you are today. So talk to me about living out of your own expectations versus others.
Well, my God. I mean, when I was married and going through all that, my expectations of life were completely different. I expected, I'm going to be a wife forever. I'm going to be married and live in this home that I own and living in this town forever. This is my job and this is my role, right? And that was my expectation.
Wow.
And then life was like, actually, no.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. And so then I moved to California 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago. And slowly I've had to realize that I have to drop all those expectations. And that in fact, expectations can be a boundary as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good way to put that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just allowing myself to drop expectations so that life can show up the way it wants. And that's okay. So grief, right? So there's a lot of grief because I've had to grieve what I thought was.
Yeah. Because that really, your truth got blown up.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't a real, there's, relative truth and there's absolute truth. And that was not absolute truth. And there's a difference. Like I always really like to tell people, like, feel into truth. You can feel truth. Mm-hmm. When you're hearing something true, it's alive. It's just good. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I try to live that now every day and setting my intention sets up life.
Okay.
And then I can let go of expectations of what that's going to be like and just know that truth is my North Star and walk that path and be present to the step I'm in, because I know that life, God has the next step taken care of as long as I'm in this moment with that intention set. So that's my expectations now are be intentional and be present.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk a lot about setting an intention each day. Can you share, what does that look like? What does that mean? Because some people, I know what that means, but it's kind of new language that we're hearing these days. And it's very personal. So what does that look like for you as you get up each morning?
So for me, it's like getting it out on paper and writing it down.
Okay.
Because also that way you're connecting your mind and your body by writing it down.
Okay. So
because you're right, it's so nuanced, all this mental health and emotional stuff. It's not like going to work out at the gym. It's just a little different. So if anytime that you can connect mind and the body with an action, then you're doing that. So, think about what you want in a day. Like, really, what do you want to feel like? So, getting into your heart space. So I work a lot with people and myself, getting myself out of my mind and into my heart, because that's where your wisdom is and that's where your body is. Yeah. So taking even 2 deep breaths and then really seeing, like, what do I want to feel like today? What do I want to feel like in my life? So one helpful way to do that is, like, as you take a couple deep breaths, think about, the time that you first kissed the person you love, the first time you saw your firstborn child, the last time you saw the most beautiful sunset you could ever think of. And then just breathe into that space that you feel it.
Yeah.
Just let that feeling grow. And then from there, let yourself think of what you want and get creative. Dream a little bit. It's okay to dream.
Yeah, I thank you for that thank you for all of that. That was super, I think that was a great insight, but also that dream piece, because we get so locked into, doing the job and having the house and, all these things. And we lose sight of the fact that maybe there's more.
Yes.
Maybe there's more, and that's okay. And that's a good thing. That's not a selfish thing. That's not an unhealthy thing. That's actually very healthy, because if you dream, you continue to allow yourself to live into who you're supposed to be.
Yes. And, I get on these calls with people at work, and everybody wants a homework assignment. Everyone wants a to-do list. And I'm going to throw this away. We have enough of those. And your soul and your heart is not a to-do list. It just isn't. There's no doing here. It's just about coming back and being with what is.
Oh, thank you. That was really good. Thank you so much, because I was a slave to to-do lists. And when I started my therapy journey, I was like, I'm going to come do this for 6 months to a year. I'm going to have some great tools. I'm going to get on the other side of it and get on with the rest of my life. I am 3 years into it. and that's not how it goes, which goes nicely into this next talking point of accepting the layered aspects of ourselves, because I keep uncovering layers.
Yes.
And so as I keep uncovering layers and keep learning more about myself, both what needs to be healed and what I didn't know about myself was there. Like, if you would have told me 3 years ago I'd be doing a podcast,
So cool.
that was just not on my radar. And it came out of a dream wall that Brady and I did on his birthday.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so anyway, but unpacking those layers, the good and the bad, accepting all that stuff into this in us and part of us. And you've addressed that really well, and how you've been able to do that, I think. But talk to me a little bit more about that specifically, the layers piece.
Yeah. What comes up for me with this is, I've had this dream since I was a little girl. Like, I would write in my diary, and I would just play with my Barbies and have this image of me like falling in love and being swept off my feet by a man, right? And just like this epic love story. And I'm getting to the layers part, I promise. But like, go. It was this, and it was this just deep-seated desire that I've always had, right? And through my divorce and marriage, and then divorce, the same person. Yeah. I've slowly realized that dream was actually, that desire was a yearning to become my own soulmate, to learn who I am, and to bring that back into myself and find the one within.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. Oh, man.
Thank you. And it's been, and I wanted to be swept off my feet by that. And so the point with the layers is that, yes, layers, because I don't want to be bored. I don't want to be stagnant. I want surprise. I want passion. I want life. I want love. I want joy. And that is just more layers we peel off, the more we find, the more beauty. And so just that constant finding of myself.
Yes. That's such a good way to
swept off my feet.
Oh, wow. And when did you realize that? At what point did that become truth to you?
Probably about a year ago. I had this deep like meditation, and I wrote this poem about Prince Charming. And I was like, oh, that's right here. And then it just continues to become more of a deeper truth the more that I continue to unveil more layers.
Yeah. Well, and going into that way, you're just such a healthier version of in whatever relationship you show up in.
Absolutely.
And you're not looking for that thing because you've already found it in you.
So totally good point. Like, what I really love about relationships and partnerships is seeing what it is about somebody and using it as a reflection of what is it about them? What is it in them that gives me something? Like, I have a lot of clients that are like, oh, when I'm around my partner, I feel so much more grounded and so much more this or that. And I'm like, okay, cool. What is it about them? And use that so that when you're by yourself, you can just get that resource from within yourself as well.
Yeah.
And that's
embody it.
Embody. Yep, exactly. And that's where interbeing comes in, right? Like versus codependency. I'm not relying on my worth. I know my worth and I know theirs. And together we are even better.
In Living Out Feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, which we've been talking about, how does that affect your relationship with yourself and then in turn your relationship with others?
Well, I think it just allows me to live more present, be with what actually is, not with what my mind is wanting to make of it. So I can live a clearer life. Sure. And far more abundant and prosperous and freer. Like I'm so much more free. Yeah. I've got I just quit my salary job and I'm on my own now. And I'm about to move again. And then I don't know where I'm going. So it's just allowing life to show up as it wants. Wow. And then for others, I think that doing this, there's less Danielle in the way of me showing up for others. So again, my story, my projection of what I think they should be drops so that now hopefully the point is that they can be in that space and see their truth more clearly reflected back at them.
Oh, yeah, that's really good. And if you have two people coming together who are able to do that, man, that is where the definition of healthy relationship. Yeah. I mean, and talking about that and knowing that it's possible, because I think we get this idea of it's just not possible and there's a difference between it being possible and being perfect. It's never going to be perfect, but it is possible. So,
oh my God. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
You have your life. It's an example of that, honestly. Rapid fire. We're down to the end. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Meditating, running, walking with my greatest friend, being with family, and my dogs.
Awesome. All right. In 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Expansive, free, safe, abundant, and unconditional love. Period.
Okay. All right. I love that. And you embody that. I really do. I mean, you really do. You have that way about you. Danielle, thank you so much. You gave me so many wow moments today in this conversation of your journey. I'm so excited, audience, for you to be able to dig into this and listen to this and take notes and look at the resources and know that you have this ability in you too on your journey, whatever that looks like. So thank you so much again for your time today. Like I said, Feel Friends, you are going to want to look at our resources page to see what Danielle has to share. You're going to want to take a look at the show notes and check out the blog, all these things. And they're all going to be available on our website and our socials. But thanks again for being with me today. Audience, if you have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, you can DM us at Embracing Layers on Instagram, or you can email us embracinglayers@gmail.com if you have any thoughts or questions about anything you've heard today. But thanks for being with us today and have a great week.